Well, hey, and I think we are live on the YouTubes. Welcome, everybody. Andy here from Andy Parish Outdoors, and this is podcast number 2 since I posted the first one, which was just my test and trial run last night, but it was worth getting posted. So this becomes number 2, and I've got a special guest. You may recognize him from a star on the YouTubes as well. Joining me on my outdoor adventures, I've got Brent from Smolder Outdoors. Hello, Brent, and welcome to the show.
Hey Andy, how's it going, buddy?
It's going all right. What do you think of this crazy setup we've got going on?
It's definitely different. Definitely different from in person out on trail talking, but I don't know. Hopefully, we'll have some fun tonight.
Yeah. So, would you do me a favor and pull up the live stream and make sure everything looks good on the YouTubes?
Yeah, I've got it up, buddy.
All right.
So,
So, we have been going through technical glitch after technical glitch. We were on today for a couple hours, probably going through everything, just trying to get this just right. Bear with us. I'm sure tonight there may even be a technical glitch or two that show up during the show. So, the more that we do this, the more skilled we'll become. So appreciate you for being here. Thanks so much for joining. This will be something hopefully we continue to do going forward. Who knows? It could be a weekly thing. It could be every other week. It's just nice, and I said this on the first podcast, it's nice to have another format other than doing just out on trail videos and gear reviews and tips and tricks. If you don't know this channel, Andy Parish Outdoors is all about backpacking, outdoor adventures, gear, most definitely gear, and a few tips and tricks along the way. But we also like to have fun, and tonight is just a chance to kind of talk a little bit about the year 2020 and all the wonderful things and all the challenges that we've had to go through, and then transition and look forward a little bit into 2021. And Brent and I have already been putting our heads together to come up with some ideas for trips, fun things to do in 2021, trying to kind of nail down that schedule. We'll have more coming up on that, but we'll probably talk about a few ideas that we're floating around out there, and would love to hear your thoughts too out there of good suggestions, good ideas to complement what we've already got going on. And then we'll open it up at the end. We already posted online earlier on our Facebook groups on Andy Parish Outdoors, but also on Hoosier Hiker Backpackers and the other one. What did we post on?
who's your hammock hangers?
Hoosier Hammockers. So there's a few questions that people posted out there. So we'll try and get to some of those too tonight after we go through all of this. So, well, 2020. Brent, what are your initial thoughts of the experience that was this year?
2020 was planned to be a pretty cool year. It was the first year that I had ideas to do some multi-night backpacking trips. It was something that I was fairly recent into, and you and I linked up towards the beginning of the year and started hiking a little bit together. And
Is that
yeah,
Goose in the
so
background?
that's Tank. I'm
Oh, that's
trying to
Tank.
get him quiet. Yeah. Hi. Can you put him in his? Can you put him up for me, please? Because he's just sitting there whining.
I was like, I don't know if that's Brent
Thank you.
whining under his breath or if one of his pooches has gotten loose.
So I totally wore Goose out and got him in his house, and he's taking a nap, and now Tank's whining. So, go figure. We're what 3 minutes into this, 5 minutes into this, and already it's starting. Peace and quiet during a pandemic is something that you don't get a lot of, right?
No, that's true.
Um,
Being cooped up, it's, it can't help but kind of overflow and spill out. I've got that with my two pups too. They want to be out and running around all the time. So hopefully they've gotten enough exercise today that when I saw them last, they were asleep in their beds. So let's see how long that
uh,
lasts.
well, back on topic. 2020 started off with a bang. We did the Tecumseh, and then the pandemic
Well,
hit,
even
and that
before
kind of.
that, even before
Well,
that.
we did Dean.
So, well, we met up. It was this year. So this is the first time we had
Yeah,
run into each other at all. We got together in the beginning of March and
yeah.
here just in Indianapolis and went out to Fort Harrison, I think it was.
On your
And
birthday.
yeah, it was back on my birthday, and we did, I don't know, a few miles or something like that. I don't think either one of us had been to that section of the fort. And then we had never met. We just, through the group on Facebook, had kind of reached out to each other, and we both knew that we lived in the same town. So it was just, a leap of faith. And I know a lot of people out there might be kind of in that same camp of, I was in a situation where I was really getting into, camping, backpacking, hiking, you name it, kind of the outdoor adventure stuff. But my collection of friends that are into that same community, into that same kind of, group was limited. So having some people that are like-minded, that have some similar interests was a priority to me. And when I linked up with Brent, having the option to get together, hey, let's go out in town, just close by. We'll do a few miles, and then afterwards we went and over to Triton Brewing, over I guess that's in
What was
Lawrence,
that pizza place?
and then Giacomo's. Went to Giacomo's
Giacomo's.
Pizza, which is I had been to once before. I don't think you had ever been to.
Nope.
And had pizza and beer. So you can't beat that after a good long hike. And, that seemed to set a theme for the rest of our adventure. So we got together, I want to say it was like 10 days after that. And we went down to Hoosier National Forest and did a pretty ambitious loop. We thought, we'll just hike a little bit and then, maybe camp out on the peninsula. And we did, I think, the Sycamore Loop, and then we were going to head over the Axum Trail over to the Peninsula Trail and go out. And Brent's like, well, I think we should go out to, what was it, Terrell Ridge?
Terrell Pond.
Let's,
and,
it just adds like
Yeah.
5 miles or something like that. I don't know which way we went. And then we were trying to figure out at one point, can we cut over from, there's supposed to be a trail behind the cemetery that's back there. Remember that? Trying to find.
Yep.
We couldn't find where that was. It's not very well worn, so people talk about it all the time. We didn't see it, and that's supposed to be a shortcut over to Axum, but no, we had to backtrack to Axum and then cut all the way over. Did we
That was a
do
long day.
13 miles, 14 miles, 15 miles, something like that?
I had 15 something on that day. It was one of my bigger days.
So I don't know that that's anywhere close to what we were thinking. I think we were talking like, let's do like 8 or 9, and then it was close to doubling that. But had a great time. Went out to the point, and had some great pictures. I remember we had some good pictures from that. Somebody even got them posted. I think that was Brent. And
just a couple.
Yeah, not to rub it in. And and then we did the other ones. Then we did the big plan after that was Tecumseh, right?
Yep, Tecumseh was next up, and that was the following month. Not even, that was a couple weeks later, because that was mid-March that we did Dean, and then
like first week of
very
April.
beginning of April. Yeah.
And
Right before the big lockdown.
Yeah, we hadn't even locked down or anything like that in Indiana. It was literally on the trip. My wife texts me and says, a couple of the counties, I think Marion County in particular, Indianapolis area, was like closing business. Like everything was going to lock down. I don't know that every county was that way, but it was kind of like, what the heck is going on? Are we going to be able to get home? Like, are the roads closed? Are they going to like ticket us for driving? Like, nobody knew. So it was kind of this. And I think by the time we ended the trip, I think I was able to look up enough information that said, all right, like you're allowed to drive through. It's just the businesses are closed, and, you're supposed to stay at home, and, so there's no real reason to be out on the street if nothing's open. So if you're just driving through the, the interstate, no big deal. But yeah, for a while there, it was trying to figure out, how do we get home? Is this a big deal? There was
Well,
all that.
we didn't have an easy way off trail either. We had a car at each end of the trail. We didn't have a bailout in the middle of it.
Well, we had one car at the end of the trail and one car that was not even close to the end of the trail.
Right. Right.
That's because I didn't know where to park. So I was way down at the, I think it's the SRA where they put the boats in, which is like a mile and a half, or I don't even know. I think every time I tell that story, it gets further. It's like, oh, it was like 0.7 of a mile, and then it's like a mile and a half. But we got to the end of the trail, and or close to the end of the trail. There's like a parking lot. You cross a road. There's a parking lot where everybody parks, a gravel lot right on the trail, and then in the booklet, it talks about another parking lot that's like right around the bend in the road down by the Lake Monroe. And so that's where we found that parking lot and parked there first. But the other one's really where you want to be. And then you have another, I don't know, is it 0.8 of a mile or a mile from that parking lot to the end of the trail, which is like dead in the middle of the woods. So you get to hike out to the middle of the woods, take your picture at the end of the, end of trail sign, and then hike back to your car, which is a little bizarre.
It's like 1.7 or 1.8 each way. It was over 3 miles.
Oh, was it that far?
Trip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But that was a good time. Tecumseh, I think, even with all our side hikes to campgrounds and to the car, I was just under 50 miles. And we did that in 4 days, 3 nights, if I remember correctly. Does that sound right?
Yeah. Yep. With a big last day for you with that extra hike to the car.
Yeah, I wasn't loving that. He pulls up a chair and puts his feet up, and it's like, I'm going to sit here and have lunch or whatever it was.
Yeah.
So he sits and eats for 20 minutes as I hike down the road to pick up the car, bring it up to the other lot, and then come back, and then we still had to finish 3.5 miles to the end of the trailhead and back. So good times. I really like that trail, though. That was my first Indiana long trail that I had done. I've done the Deem stuff, which is great for people that are looking at beginner spots. The Charles Deem Wilderness on the south side of Lake Monroe is fabulous for lots of short hikes and campsites, and it's a beautiful area. And I'd done things there, and then I'd done things up at Morgan Monroe State Forest, near Bloomington, Low Gap Trail, that kind of area. So you can do some backcountry camping that's free, and lots of spots. So I'd done those short trips. None of them more than, I don't know, 5-10 miles until we did that Deem one, 15 one day, and then we had to hike out 5 miles or something like that, maybe a little bit more than that.
Because it was like 7 to 8 because we had to go all the way down to the fire tower.
Yeah, so that was probably the biggest trip for Indiana. Well, I'm trying to think. I did one other trail that was 10 miles the year before, but it's 5 miles in, 5 miles out, and that was the Two Lakes Loop down in southern Indiana. But these were definitely more challenging, a lot more into it, carrying more, instead of having one overnight and a little bit of food just to get you through those 2 days, having 4 days worth of food and gear and everything was a big deal for me. I really enjoyed doing that here locally. I'd had a chance to do something like that out west the year before, but not in Indiana. So I really enjoyed, getting to learn what Indiana was like and the topography. And early April, the leaves weren't completely all the way out. So, remember that climb that we had out of Yellowwood Lake campground? You go up the
High King Hill, man.
High King Hill. I
remember it.
And then there's a bench, which I loved, that's on the top of that hill. So as you're climbing out, heading southbound, you get to the top and you stop, and it's a pretty decent climb for Indiana. You get to the top, and there's just a bench looking back over the lake. So that was pretty cool. Just to sit down and be the old man, and Wish I had a beer at that point in time.
We got lucky with Yellowwood Campground still being open too, because it was right at the tail end of that trip that they shut down all the campgrounds.
Yeah, I want to say the week after,
Yeah.
something like
So
that.
that really threw a monkey wrench in plans if you were trying to do it in 3 nights. Just not having anywhere to camp right there would have been really difficult to do that trail with our plan.
Yeah, I'd really love to see my suggestion, and I know they're adding shelters all the time. We stayed at was it the following night is Charlie Shelter?
No, Yellowwood was night 3.
Oh,
Night 1
Yellowwood was
was
night 3.
Morgan
Was it?
Monroe Backcountry.
Yeah,
Night
that's
2 was Charlie's.
so Charlie
And
Shelter
night
was
3 was
nice because
Yellowwood.
it's newer, and it's a great location. So they have a brand new one that's just outside the Low Gap Trail Loop, which was perfect for I wish it was done when we went through because you can hike a little further, get out of the area where you catch a lot of the day hikers, get to the shelter, and I thought that'd be great spot. So I'd love to go back and check that out. It was under construction. I even got video of going past that shelter. So, but I'd love to see one at the top of High King Hill, somewhere that way, so that you didn't have to go into Yellowwood Campground, which you have to pay to use. So the other spots along the trail, there's no cost. So you can just stay at the shelters. They're free. And then you get to Yellowwood and there's no free option. There's no, backcountry camping. It's just a, state campground, I think. Is it run by
Yeah. Yeah,
DNR?
it
So
is. Yep.
you have to go in and fill out, and there's nobody working. So you just, fill out your card, you put the money in the envelope and you drop it in the drop box and you reserve a site that way. So it's kind of first come, first serve. So you could get there and maybe it would be full. I guess that's possible. I don't really know. We've only done it that one time, but it worked out. I would love to see a shelter up that hill somewhere in the next mile or two where, again, you wouldn't have to worry about a public campground. You could just go and know there's a shelter and a surrounding area that you can camp wherever you want.
Yeah, and we know easements on property. We know that the trail runs through areas that aren't state forests, etc. But if they could put a shelter in every 5 to 7 miles or so, that would just be, like you said before, it would open up so many different trip plan options for people. You're kind of pigeonholed into 1 or 2 different ways to do that trip right now.
Yeah. You have to, kind of schedule your mileage based on where a few of the shelters are, and there's not a real, there's not a lot of flexibility to move outside of that. But that being said, I really love that trail. I thought that was really cool. And if you're a hiker that's looking for a beginner, longer range trail, a multi-day trail, I think that Tecumseh in Indiana is probably the best one that I've done so far. There's really only, what are there, 3 that are long enough to be considered kind of multi-day like
Multi-day.
that. 2 Lakes Loop, that's a 1 overnight possibly. You can finish that easily in a day, 10 miles roughly. But when you get to like the AHT, or what we've got slated coming up, we'll talk about later, the Knobstone, those are, the AHT is shorter, so it's 25 miles that we did on that, but the topography is much more challenging. So that would be something that I'd encourage, even training a little bit for, because, they don't believe in, zigzagging across the hill. All those trails in the AHT were like they were made for mountain bikers, which I think is what the trail history the thing just goes straight up the hill and straight down the other side. So there's not a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? Switchbacks. They had hardly any, and they probably could have used a bunch and had it been more enjoyable, but that's just not the layout of the course right now. So, and I hear Knobstone's pretty much the same way. We'll find out sooner rather than later, but Tecumseh, if you're a beginner and you're looking for, even if you do it in a section, you don't have to do the whole thing. There's lots of spots along the way. We mentioned Yellowwood. There was some right by, which lake did we pass at the beginning? It was a Deem Lake.
Where?
The one that's, you're coming out of Low Gap Trail, and you come down the side of the hill past the new shelter. Bear Lake, is that what it was? Yeah, Bear Lake.
Yep.
And there's parking lot there, so a lot of people, if you wanted to do that section of trail and have a car waiting for you, you could get picked up. You could hike all the way then into Yellowwood. That was my favorite day of hiking, was Charlie Shelter to Yellowwood.
Agreed.
Does that sound right? So that was day 3. Really love that section. That was a beautiful section of trail. Lots to, visually, stimulation was great.
Lots of pine trees.
Yeah, I mean, you had a little everything, but you had pine groves, and you had some good views. You had coming up on the lake. I mean, we had lots of stuff in a short distance that really, kind of caught your eye. So I really like that. I can't say enough positive things about the Tecumseh Trail. I'd love to do that again, maybe a different season, just to see what it's like, a different time of year. Sure. But early April was spectacular.
Awesome.
I don't think we could have nailed it any better than we did, timing wise, because the weather was. Yeah. I don't think we got a little bit of rain one night while we were in our hammocks, but nothing while we were on trail.
Around 60 during the day and 40 at night. I mean, it was great for being outside. Weather was just perfect that first week of April.
Yeah. That's no bugs. The leaves weren't out.
Yep.
So you got to enjoy the views. So loved it.
I didn't even have a bug net on my hammock for that trip.
Yep.
I was just open in the air.
I don't know what I had. I'd have to go back and look if I had just the winter top cover. It was chilly, but it wasn't cold. 30, upper 30s, maybe mid 40s or something overnight. 65 during the day. It was really nice. So that's probably the sweet spot for me. Hiking in Indiana is either that kind of early April, mid-April time slot, or once the leaves change. I mean, that's pretty, October is probably the other spectacular time. Although I've really grown to love winter. That's probably one of my new favorites. I don't mind so much the freezing cold as much. I don't really love, like when we did the AHT, which we can talk about next. I want to say that was July.
That was a fun trip.
Was that July?
June.
End of June?
Mid-June. It was mid-June.
It's one of those, southern Indiana, you're down right on the Ohio River. You can see Kentucky on the other side, and it's west of Louisville, and it was just hot. And you're kind of bushwhacking through sections of the trail where it's a little overgrown. Some sections they really did a great job of maintaining it, but you could tell there's other spots that it's just hard to keep up on. The ticks were horribly bad in some sections, and then completely non-existent in others. But sleeping in a hammock, like sweating, I'm not a huge fan of
dripping with sweat
of that feeling. And then so I'd much rather go in colder weather. I don't mind. I had a great time February, even before we got together. I went down to Red River Gorge and in February and just caught the tail end of a snowstorm. So there goes Brent.
Yep. Beer
time for another beer. Get me one while you're up. No.
That might be a little difficult to get it over to you there, buddy.
Well, social distancing. That's right. I am. I'm not doing beer tonight. I'm doing Woodford. So
nice. Hey, we need one of those little tubes like the banks have between our houses.
Oh, where you can send me
just
beer
shoot beers
over
back and forth.
Oh,
Yeah.
it has to be back and forth.
Yeah, back and forth, not one way.
I'm less of a fan then. If you want to set one up and it just you can restock me periodically, I'd be all for that.
I mean, Christmas is coming up, buddy.
'Tis the season.
It is.
So,
And I mean, I've got
yep,
the good stuff.
zombie dust.
Always.
So I apologize. I've got like all these screens up and looking at everything. So I'm trying to remember, you guys are the one that are tuning in to watch. And so, I should be polite and occasionally make eye contact, because staring at the screens with Brent over here and over here, it's probably not a great experience for you guys at home, but I appreciate everybody that's here watching. Who knew actually people would tune in to listen to this guy over here? So, and me.
Apparently, Tank wants to listen to me because he's whining again.
Well, he misses you. I mean, can you blame him? They just want to snuggle. They just want to sit on your lap. Although he weighs how much?
About 75 pounds.
So yeah,
I'm gonna go quiet him down.
So let's see, what else can we move on to? So the AHT, we talked about that a little bit. The Adventure Hiking Trail, Southern Indiana, we really enjoyed that one, but that was a lot more challenging and a little more brutal. I think the environment of the Tecumseh was much more enjoyable. The AHT was a lot more challenging. And then we threw on top of that the idea that, hey, let's do an ultralight challenge. So the goal was starting out on the AHT, which is about, I want to say it's a 25-mile loop.
Whose dumb idea was that, by the way?
That we would go ultralight. So you had to have a base weight of under 10 pounds. So neither one of us, have you ever done that before? I had never.
No.
I never thought about doing an under 10-pound base weight. And,
so let's take a hard trail and make it harder with long water carries and frameless ultralight packs. Why not, right?
So so the AHT, Southern Indiana, it's kind of this, what do they call it? Karst topography, which means like there's tons of like underground caverns. It's a very hilly area. So because of all those underground caverns and everything, you have like sinkholes and, water just disappears off that trail constantly. So people talk about, you could have really rainy time of year, and within a day or two or short period of time, these creeks that have water running, it just vanishes. Like it drops down into these caverns underground, which hold the water. So you're hiking this 25-mile loop, and there's almost nowhere to get water. You can see like the Ohio River at one point. It's too far off. You go over this cliff on the east side of the loop, and there's, a huge cliff down, and you see another river down below, and then there's one on the west side, which there's kind of muddy banks that I know people do go down to top off, but it's not an easy water source. So you end up caching water at certain spots around the trail, so that, we were leaving just water gallons every, 7, 8, 10 miles, something like that. There were like 3 or 4 spots around the trail that we had dropped either gallons of water or a couple liter, a liter bottle here, a liter bottle there, because you just run out of water. And it was late June, something like that, and it was hot, and you were burning calories and just sweating like crazy. So like every time you got to a new one, you were just loading up with water, because you knew I had to make it 7 or 8 miles to the next water drop, and you're just burning through water. It's just pouring out of you in sweat. So that was, and then to try and do it ultralight. So we're taking smaller packs. We're, I think I was carrying, there was at least 1 or 2 times that I was carrying more weight in water than I was in my base weight, just to make it. So I don't know what we were thinking on that one, but it made it interesting.
Why not, right? It's a good story, right?
We needed a new challenge, I guess. So Not sure I would recommend that on that particular course. And then, you might talk about this too. After doing that course, there's a lot of spots on that trail that we think would have pretty amazing views. The Ohio River from up top on the bluffs to the east side where you have, the big cliffs down to the river below. But most of the trail when we were hiking it in June was just, is overgrown and it was dense. So you couldn't see anything.
Yeah. Well, and we kept saying that during that trip too. We kind of had two slogans. One was "It's an adventure," and the second one was, "Man, how great would this trail be? In winter when the leaves were down, the weather was cool, the ticks are gone. Like it would just be a totally different experience." And that's a whole nother side of these Indiana trails is hiking something in June and hiking something in December. You're going to have a whole different, sense of the trail. So
yeah,
it would be fun.
I would love to get back and do that in the winter.
Yeah, I agree. That would be a great trail to hit in the winter. And, realistically, without the heat, without the bugs, without the overgrowth, we could probably do it in an overnight.
Without the ticks?
Yeah, just everything slowing us down. I really feel like it would be a doable overnight for us.
Yeah, I think that would be a lot of fun. That would be one that I would definitely say the tip or trick that I would give on the AHT, along with where to catch your water to spread it out, is the go before the leaves have come out or after they're down, so that you get the views. I think there's some spots for some really spectacular views, but we just didn't get a lot of that just because of how overgrown it was.
Yeah.
So
it was definitely a challenge, though. I mean, I'm glad that we did it. I'm glad we accomplished it. I would never attempt that trail again in the middle of June, not for enjoyment anyways. That's one that I would hit when it's a little cooler outside.
Yeah, agreed. And then, in our minds, then the next one up, which was on the books, which is the Knobstone. So we had that on the books for
October.
Was it October? Well, we had
October.
It, and then we pushed it though, didn't we? Didn't we look?
Yep.
At one point it was October, but I think it was my schedule that fouled it all up. So kids are doing all their things, and October is like the best times to be hiking, but also the busiest times if you're doing like fall athletics. So we pushed it. I want to say it was like the first week of December. So we thought, all right, let's do it later. It'll be cooler, chillier, but not a big deal. We, maybe we'll get some really good views, kind of like what we were talking about with the AHT. And then I
took off work for it.
Yeah.
I mean.
So don't I feel like the jerk because when was this? This was probably, I want to say it was a week or so before Thanksgiving. I'm in the backyard giving pointers to my daughter for, her upcoming basketball season. So we're out on the court, doing some jumpers, doing some drills, and Dad's like, "Oh, let me show you how to do it." And I pushed off, went to the side and said, "Well, that didn't feel right." And sure enough, later that night when my knee swelled up like a balloon, I knew that was not what it's supposed to look like. So went in and found that I tore my meniscus. Luckily, it wasn't anything worse, and scheduled surgery. So right now, I think I'm, 14, 15 days out from having my knee scoped. And
walking?
Moving around pretty good. It feels pretty good. I've made a lot of progress, but I've got a ways to go to get back to hiking. But that totally, I remember texting you or calling you saying, "Dude, I'm sorry, but I don't think I'm going to be able to do this." And I was thinking even at the time, well, maybe I'll just tough it out and we'll try it anyway. The Knobstone on one knee.
The doctor said I can go straight line. I just can't go side to side.
That was the initial discussion that he had was, you probably wouldn't notice a whole lot if you're just going straight forward. But as soon as you go side to side or cut or slip or slide, you're going to feel it. So So I scheduled surgery the beginning of December, right like a couple days before we were supposed to go out on trail. So that's on me. I screwed up the end of 2020, and we're going to have to push that into sometime in 2021. I'm not sure exactly when, but we were really looking, at least I was really looking on finishing what I was calling, I think on the AHT, I was calling the Indiana Triple Crown. So if you want to do the 3 long trails in Indiana, in my mind, and again, this is just my own personal list, it's Tecumseh, it's the Adventure Hiking Trail, and it's the Knobstone. I think those are kind of the 3 premier trails in Indiana, multi-day hikes. So our goal was, hey, let's crank them all out in 2020, and we were definitely on pace to do that in October or December, and injury got in the way. So we'll just push that Triple Crown completion back into the beginning of 21 sometime. I'm not sure exactly when, but that's still real high on my list.
Yeah, no big deal though, man. It happens. We'll get it done.
I'm working it. I'm trying to get back to full strength. So we've got high hopes for 21. I don't know about you, but Knobstone is up there. I kind of, that to me, that's unfinished business from 2020.
Agreed.
So I almost don't consider it 2020 because it's like I didn't get that done. So we're gonna. It's a late assignment for me. It's something that I'm gonna complete in 21, but for me that was something that really was on the books for 20. And then there's the last trip of 2020 that we did.
Big one.
The big one. So, and that one was out of the blue. I remember having that conversation with you, and we were talking about, you called me up or texted me out of the blue, and you're like, I think I got some vacation or something, and why don't we try and squeeze in a trip? And we were looking at, what was it, September? Does that sound about right? So we were looking at September. Hey, I got some time. Do you think we could do something? And we were looking, I forget what the initial list was, but it wasn't like something huge. It was like, oh, we got a couple days. Let's look at, somewhere around here. Do you want to do something within a couple hours drive or something? And at some point you and I got to talking about like, well, I think I told you, the flights out west are dirt cheap right now because nobody's flying anywhere. And you're like, seriously? I'm like, yeah, I think you can fly to Denver for like $200. Maybe it's less.
I had been talking about a trail in Colorado multiple times throughout the year, one that had been recommended to me by someone who lived out there, and kept saying it was on my bucket list. It was on my bucket list, and that's where you're like, hey, man, flights are dirt cheap right now.
Yeah, they were real cheap. I don't know. I'd have to go back and look at exactly what we paid, but I remember thinking, holy cow, you can get out there for like next to nothing. This is crazy. So how about Colorado or something? And you're like, oh, I've already got that one picked out. I know where to go. And to be honest, I don't think I'd even heard of it. But part of that is I haven't really looked out west because I'm still newer into this. So I've kind of really scoured what's driving distance. I looked at Red River Gorge, high on my list nearby. We looked at, Garden of the Gods, Southern Illinois. We looked at Pictured Rocks, Upper Michigan. I'm looking at, going out to the like Mid-Atlantic. You talked about going to Virginia this year.
Triple Crown, but that got canceled because of the pandemic.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot that you can hit that are reasonably close. There's a lot in like Western PA. If you wanted to go out that way, Dolly Sods. I mean, there's the Sheltoe going through Kentucky, Big South Fork, Northern Tennessee, Cumberland Gap, so many amazing areas and spots for hiking that you don't have to go very far to get some mountains, get some topography, get some long distance sections. So if you wanted to do a 50-mile section of trail, I mean, there's tons of those. There's not a whole lot of that in Indiana. Like I said, we kind of mentioned the 3 big ones, and they're all about 60, 25 to 60 miles. That's about it that they cap out at. So, finding something that's a couple
Unless they
hundred
finish
miles
the
long.
Pioneer.
Well, yeah, but a lot of that's road walking. I don't think there's a lot of that's finished trail yet that goes through Indiana. So I hadn't looked out west, and you're like, oh, I got one for you.
Yeah, I do. And that was the 4-pass loop up by Aspen. I had talked to a couple people on some of the ultralight backpacking groups and kept seeing it pop up. And there's someone that I know who used to live out here who lives out there now. And that person was like, if you like backpacking and you're coming west, you got to hit the 4-pass loop. It's a bucket list thing. They're like, you just have to do it. And so that's when we started looking at it, right?
Yeah. And it was quick. It was like, hey, this is coming up in 7 weeks, 6 weeks.
Yeah.
I think it was a little over a month. I'm not positive, but it was something like that. So it was like, okay, if we're going to do this, we have to have a plan pretty quick so that we can buy tickets pretty quick and make sure still while everything's cheap. And so I'm looking at hotels, I'm looking at trail maps, I'm trying to figure out how many days on trail, all that sort of stuff. So it's, I don't know, 30 miles, 25 miles, something like that. Was it 30? The whole loop?
Yeah. Mine registered right at 30, I think.
So that was pretty cool. Having that as an opportunity and then do the planning and the turnaround.
So I decided, hey, that's the trip that I really want to do, and I kept talking about it, and then Andy planned the whole thing for me. It was great. I didn't have to do anything.
Yeah.
It was like my own personal travel agent.
It totally was. I was like, okay, I got your flight. I got your hotels. You have to do your own food. And here's the trail plan. Here's day 1. Here's where we're camping. Here's day 2 where we're camping. Day 3 where we're camping. And then we make it back. Here's the shuttle.
There's water here, and here.
Yeah.
Pack your bag and enjoy your trip.
Pack your bag and follow along. I'll show you where everything is. But I think part of that was just the crunch of time. And for me, it was like, there's not a whole lot of time to him and Haw to try and figure this out. We kind of have to just make a decision and go. So at that point, when we're like, this is a go, I'm like, all right, well then let's get everything in line. So it was rental car, it was the hotel, it was the flights, it was, where we're going to eat. We weren't staying in Aspen the whole time. So it was, flying to Denver, stop at, REI downtown at the flagship store, get our fuel canisters and kind of tour the place, and then get out to Aspen, spend the night there. So find a hotel there. And then we thought, the 4-pass loop, that's got to be easy, right? Like it's only 4 passes at 12,500 feet and, 30 plus miles or whatever it is. So let's do a 14er, like the day after we get off trail, was the original plan. So we had like Mount Elbert. So we were staying in Leadville. What is that? Like an hour-ish away from Aspen. So we get off trail, we get back to the car, grab our stuff and throw it in the car. And then we're driving all the way into Leadville and checking into the motel there. And then we wanted to check out the town, go to Melanzana, grab some great pizza. Oh, you got the Melly on tonight.
Yeah. I do. I got the Melly
on. I didn't even notice that. But I got my son that exact one. He's got an all blue one. Loves it. It's like, he's like, that's the most comfortable one, I've ever worn. So I still don't know if I love the hood on those things though. They're kind of, I don't know how to describe it. It's kind of like you're wearing a
hood.
No, not even the hood. Like wearing and I'm drawing a blank on like the tubular. Yeah, like wearing a buff. It's like a hoodie that has a built-in buff around it, because like a lot of them will just lay flat on your chest, and this has got like 3 inches of flare at the bottom. Yeah, so it totally has that kind of buffy kind of feel built into the
That's the
hood.
idea, because you can wear it.
And be a ninja at the same time.
Exactly, man. Look at this. Look, I'm like ninja mode.
Yeah. Yeah. And he wears that on trail like that all the time.
Right? I do, man. Always. Now, I do wear this Melly a ton, though, man. I love it.
So let's wrap up 2020. We had what, 4-pass loop, and what's your thoughts on that trail now that we've done it? Everybody says if you're going to Colorado and you want a classic Colorado hiking trail to get you kind of the alpine backpacking backcountry experience, 4-pass loop it's got to be real high on the list, if not number one. Would you agree, disagree?
Completely agree. Now, granted, I haven't done a ton out west, but it should be on everybody's bucket list if you're a serious backpacker. I think the draw to it is that you get so much different scenery. You're climbing mountains, you're going through forested areas, you're getting all these different views, all these different aspects, and you can do it in a 30-mile trail. So, I mean, there's people out there that trail run it in one day. They do it in 10 hours. I don't know how, but 4 days, 3 nights clockwise was perfect for me. I thought the trip was incredible in every way. It's one of those memories that I'll cherish forever, and looking forward to getting out west and doing some more stuff. But honestly, that one's going to be really, really tough to top.
Yeah.
And, for a guy like me where, I'm a retail store manager, I get a limited amount of time off a year. So if I want to go experience something, being able to do it in that 4-day time span and have just that incredible of a trip, it was just, words couldn't even describe it. I mean, we both made videos of the trip. There's tons of information out there of it, but it was a life-changing experience for me. It was incredible.
Yeah, I mean, there were so many, and I'm just looking through some of the pictures from that trip that were just epic stuff. I mean, you go through some of the views and the mountain passes and the climbs. Man, I'm showing a picture of us coming up to Buckskin Pass, and it's just vertical, for a mile or two. Yeah, and you're just, I mean, it's awesome. You can see people at the top, and that wasn't even the hardest one that we went up. But
that was the easiest one of the 4.
Yeah, it probably was. Well, because we went clockwise. If you go counterclockwise, I would still be at the bottom of this picture that I'm showing right now. You probably can't see, but yeah. I'm down there by Crater Lake trying to make that climb because it is absolutely brutal going the other direction, and some people love that. But that was our 4th pass. So
it was just, I mean, I can't even describe how incredible that trip was, though. Things I will say, though, is don't just wing it. Make sure that you're ready to go out there, and don't bring as much food as you think you want, because you'll probably skip lunch.
Yeah, well, it depends. If you're bringing Brent along, Brent won't allow you to stop for lunch ever. I think it was day 1. And we don't have that big of a day. Like day 1 is all climb going clockwise, but it's not a bad climb. It's kind of a gradual, get you used to elevation kind of climb. You start at, I don't even know. I'd have to go back and look at the numbers, but if I was to guess, it's something like you start at, 7,000 feet or maybe 7,500 feet in elevation, and you're climbing to...
We camped right at 11,000.
Yeah, so right about that. And the pass is at 12,500, just a little bit beyond that. So, 7,000, 8,000 feet, somewhere in there that you're starting. You're climbing to 11 or somewhere before that. So, we could have stopped at 9,500, 10,000, 10,500, 11. There's campsites all through that section of that trail. But we were like, well, let's push it as far as we can. We'll get kind of at the base of the climb for the pass. So the next morning you get up, you have breakfast, and you get on trail, and we're into the climb. Like the pass is 2 miles ahead or something like that. But, it was one of those days where I think we got to 2:00 in the afternoon, and I'm like, hey dude, can we like stop for lunch? Like it's 2:00. When do you plan on stopping? If we go another hour, we're like a mile from camp. So at that point, why would we even stop? We just keep going. And he's like, yeah, fine, whatever.
Okay.
We can do
All
that.
right, I guess. If you really need to
Sure. If you need to eat or something, like go ahead. We've only been hiking since, I don't know, what did we do? 6 miles at that point in time, 5 miles.
something like that, 5 miles.
And I'm glad we stopped because we just had a chance to kind of relax for a minute, take the pack off, sit down, get the chairs out. And
well, we had gotten away from most of the big crowds too for the day hikers that were there just seeing the bells. We had finally gotten out more in the open, and we're really experiencing the trail.
Yeah, and that was really cool. So, but that I want to say that was the only day we stopped for lunch. I think.
Yeah,
I think every day after that, I don't even know if I ate on trail. It was kind of like, hey, we're not stopping today. We're gonna power on through. So at the end of the trip, I had like 2, at least maybe 3 lunches still in my food bag, and I'm like, I'm carrying way too much food. I could have probably had a power bar, and that's it. And some of them I had like, I don't know, buffalo chicken wrap, which I was really looking forward to, but maybe that would have been a better dinner. I ate all my dinners, I ate all my breakfasts, but my lunches, I just carried them with me. So, and there was a lot of times too, even the breakfasts, I'm not that hungry, and I think that's one of my fears. I don't know about you guys out there. One of mine is food, running out of food and not having enough. And as I'm getting more experienced with doing this, I'm realizing that I pack too much food. It's still like I've been able to phase out the other stuff of packing too much clothing. I'm trying to think what else. It may be carrying too much water at stretches. So managing that better. Hey, if I've got 5 miles to the next stream, let's only carry what I need to get me there. Let's not carry 3 extra liters for fun. I've been pretty good at kind of phasing those things out. I still haven't phased out the food issue. I still feel like, I want to say on that trip for 4 days, I had like 4.5, 5 pounds of food or something crazy. And I probably came back with 1 pound plus.
I had 6 because I had that bottle of Fireball that I took one shot out of the whole trip and then just
first night.
it.
That was first night, wasn't it? First
Yep.
night had some Fireball.
Yep.
And then carried the flask the rest of the way. Yeah,
Yeah.
6. And I was telling you to take less because I remember that you were like, I'm taking 6, and I'm like, I'm down to 5, and I think that might be too much. And it probably was. I probably could have been at maybe a gauge for me, 1 pound a day of food. Yeah. I just find on those type of trails, even at elevation 1, I didn't have the appetite that I thought I would. Yeah.
I thought I would. I thought burning all those calories, doing all those climbs, that I was going to be eating like a horse, and it was the total opposite. I didn't eat nearly as much as I thought I would. So, good knowledge for the future, though. If we go out west again, now we know to gauge our food better, less weight to carry.
Yeah, I could manage on a lot less. So, even if I underpacked a little bit, I don't think I would have been that impacted. If I was a little bit short, I probably would have been okay. I just had a lot, I had a lot of snacks. I had a lot of lunches. I could have pared down a lot of that stuff and probably would have had a much, much better experience just not carrying. I mean, why carry an extra 2 pounds if you don't need it?
Sorry, guys. I hope we're not boring you about our food talk on trail.
Well, I think it goes to the bigger question of, making mistakes and learning. We've been doing this a fair amount of time. Neither one of us are experts by any stretch. I feel like I have a decent knowledge base, but I'm always looking to learn, always looking to get better, to refine my skills, to understand things better. I look at the guys that have been doing this a lot more and have a lot more insight. There's a ton of information out there, even if it's just with our Facebook groups, whether it's blogs that are out there. Watch a lot of YouTube stuff. There's so much good information out there about how do you become better at this. I really enjoy it. I love it. But I want to be better at this. And I feel like, this year has been huge leaps and bounds jumps for me, just from knowledge, comfort level, confidence, and all of this stuff that, I'm not really fazed by anything. I really feel like, my gear choices has really dialed in. I love my setup. I really love my setup. I think it works really well for me. We did that one trip of base weight under 10 pounds, but on a normal trip, mine's probably about 12. On a cooler, colder weather trip, it might be 14 or 15. But I love that. It was just a couple years ago, I'm at 25, 30 pounds, lugging that stuff around, and I've really been able to dial in and learn a lot from others, and pool information from different sources. Oh, I really like what so-and-so's doing. I really like what so-and-so's doing. Let me put those together. I like this, and I've kind of just come up with my own setup that works, and I love it. So now I feel like, we're going to go late season, Colorado, Wyoming, Idaho. I'm game for that. There's very little I have to change in my setup to be able to handle that, or, do summers in North Carolina, going down to the AT and doing stuff down. I feel like it's versatile, it's modular. I can adjust my setup to whatever kind of environment I'm going to, but I've got good quality stuff that I've acquired over the last 5 years. But I think it serves me really well, and I've watched you go through that same kind of evolution, even in just this year, from what we were doing in the first time out at Deem to the end of the year. There's quite a bit of a change,
changes. Right? Yeah. I'd say, I've completely overhauled what I'm doing, and now it changes trip to trip. Everybody's gear does, but there's times I'm in a hammock, there's times I'm in a tent. I've gone through 3 different hammocks this year. I've changed a lot of things. I've tried a lot of things, trying to find that sweet spot for me of what I really like. And I think I've got it narrowed down to a couple different loadouts that I can do situationally, just depending on what I'm doing, where I'm going, and what the weather's going to be like.
Yeah.
But it's been great being able to do all the trips that we've done this year, to be able to try those different things and kind of experience it and, pick each other's brains. I know we talk gear a lot, so it's definitely been a fun progression this year, but I feel like I'm really, really getting a handle on what I want to bring and what I want to do to be comfortable and successful too. So
yeah, and I think that leads to a lot of excitement for 2021. So, to kind of give some insight into what we're thinking, we've talked a little bit. We don't have a whole lot ironed out because I think we're trying to figure out, family stuff first, and then figure out how do we make this work around those, because I think we're all dealing with that, in some respect. We've got obligations, whether it's work, whether it's family, whatever, and we've got to navigate through those and find availability and openings to do the things that we want to do. But we've talked early on in 2021, I think one thing that's really high for both of us is doing a hike down in Smoky Mountain National Park. So that's one that I think we've both looked at, said, yep, I am game for that. We're looking, I think right now, somewhere in the March timeframe, late March, seems to be a good time to be down there. We've got to make sure that works out with family and work schedules and whatnot. But late March gives some possibility that the weather's warming up a little bit. You're looking at temperatures that are in the mid 50s and 60s during the day. You might have some that dip below freezing at night. You've still got a little bit of snow on the ground potentially, but conditions are improving, and yet it's not super overcrowded yet. Some of those conditions will help keep some folks away, because I think last year too, and I know the years before, sometimes that's like the number one visited national park is Smoky Mountain National Park. So, going prime time, May, even late April, somewhere in there, you may be dealing with huge crowds, and you've got the AT that runs right through that park. So, part of our goal is to have a section of trail that at least overlaps a little bit with the AT, just so we get a little bit of that experience. But we may do a loop in the backcountry that then goes off and connects with part of the AT and back. But we thought that's a good time of year where the conditions will still be a little bit challenging. The elevation, the vertical gain is always a challenge in that section. So physically, we've got to be ready to go. But I think that'd be an awesome trip. I'm looking forward to that.
Sure. I am too. Good luck planning it.
Well, I'm not going to plan the whole thing, but I am going to probably plan most of it. So we've got that. We've got, I think sometime later in the year, we're going to look at doing the KT, the Knobstone here in Indiana, and finishing that. We have to figure out how many days we want to take to finish the Knobstone. Depending on how many miles we want to crank out, whether we do that in 3 days, 4 days, somewhere like that. And then I think on our minds is to then try and plan something big out west. I think we both want to do that again. We have to find time where that's going to fit, but I've already started nailing that down. He picked the 4-pass loop last year, so he said after that trip, he's like, all right, I picked this one, even though I ended up planning it. You did pick it, so you said, okay, you can pick the next one. So I am going through the process right now trying to pick, and there's great stuff out. I mean, when you start looking out west, holy cow, there is just endless amount of options. And maybe, those of you that are watching can throw some ideas out there. We're looking at, the winds in Wyoming. We're looking at the Holy Cross Wilderness in Colorado. We've talked about doing the Teton Crest. We've talked about doing a section of the Sawtooth Mountain range in Idaho. We've talked about Glacier National Park. We've talked about a little bit of the Cascades. And that's just scratching the surface. There's so many. I mean, that's probably a tenth of what I've looked at, but those have been ones that are real high on my list. So if you've got great experiences, if you've done anything out west or ones that are on your bucket list, I'd love to hear thoughts. Glacier is beautiful. Have you been? I would love to see that with my own eyes at some point in time. Man, I would love to get out and see Glacier. Everything I see from out there is just epic in scenery. And 4-pass loop in Colorado was that. I mean, I don't think we were let down at all. That was an amazing section.
That was incredible.
So that's where we're at, I think, with 2021. Brent, do you have anything that I know you just walked away? But
yeah, my computer died. Trying to get it back up. At least the phone's still going though, so I'm still here.
Yeah, well, that's a plus. What would you add to the list? Is there any that's top 3 that we didn't mention?
No, I think you nailed it. I think I'm leaning towards like the winds, something along those lines, something where we can get in some good miles, see a lot of mountain landscape. But like you said, there's so many options out there that, I'm open. I got to pick the last one, so this one's all you, buddy. As long as I'm out west and seeing mountains, I'm happy. If anyone's going to give us any suggestions, we're looking at, having basically a week to play with out there. So 7-8 days, including travel time max.
Yeah.
So do not recommend something that's like 3 weeks long because we can't do it.
Do the CDT, the whole thing.
Right. That would be nice. Go hike the John Muir Trail. Yeah. Good luck getting a permit.
Yeah.
It's just, there's things that we can and can't do. So.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we'll narrow this down probably pretty quick here as we get into the next month or so, because we've got, like you mentioned, permitting in some of these spots is a big issue. So you want to get that stuff in as soon as you possibly can. I'm not so worried about flights and things like that, but it's more like availability. Can you get into some of these spots? Like even Four Pass Loop. Last year was the last year pre-permits. They were talking about for 2021 going to a permit schedule to limit the amount of traffic that it's getting, because it is such a popular trail. So, and
that is a little tricky though, because you can't just drive up and park there. They do have permitted overnight backpacking or day hiking stuff, and then they have like a parking garage with shuttle passes and all that. So that was the first attempt, and like you said, next year they're looking at full-blown camping permits and only so many people on the trail.
Well, and think about how many people come in from Crested Butte or come in from the northeast side, into Snowmass. There's so many different ways that you can access that loop, not just from Aspen. So trying to limit just how many people, I'd love to see how many thousands of people went on that trail last year. It has to be a huge number.
You remember our day one when we got to the box out there, they were out of backpacking permits. We had to write on the back of someone else's.
Yeah, you get to the thing and they're like, make sure you fill out your form and you put it in the box, and we get there and there's like 3 of them in there and they're all filled out and there's nothing else. So we literally had to take somebody else's and write our information. And then you're supposed to tear off like the second sheet and you take that with you. So in case you run into a ranger on trail, hey, here's my proof. We had none of that. So just, hey, I hope this works out. But luckily it did. But yeah, to have a more organized, number of people out there where they can limit, especially peak times, I think makes some sense. But as we do planning for 2021, we've definitely got to look at that option. So. All right. Is there anything else that we want to add for 21? That would be, we've talked about a trip out west, Smoky Mountain National Park, and Knobstone.
East, west, and KT. Those are the big 3 for us this year.
So I'm sure we'll have a bunch of smaller things locally. I don't know that we'll have. I mean, we've talked about the other ones locally. Regionally, I guess is the best way to put it, is Pictured Rocks and Garden of the Gods. And trying to think. I mean, we've talked about like Sheltoe down in Kentucky, not to the level that we've talked about the other 2. I think Pictured Rocks and Garden of the Gods are high on that list.
Yep. And I've been to Garden of the Gods. You haven't.
No.
I've never backpacked it, but I've day hiked it out there.
Yep.
It's awesome. It's very similar to the Gorge. So,
yeah, Gorge is awesome. I would love to get back to the Gorge or to the wilderness area just east of there. I think there's so much to see. You could probably go there 10 different times and never go to the same area and have a blast. There's just a lot in that area, and that's not too far for us to make it down there. So, love to go back to the Gorge. So, all right. Do you have any questions or anything that folks that were watching or we posted on our groups on Facebook earlier today, if they had any questions specifically that they wanted us to look at?
Well, there were a couple, and I just told you my laptop died, so I'm going to go off on memory here.
Okay.
With a few.
I might be able to pull that up too.
Yeah, I know one of them that caught my attention that I thought would have been a big one for you to answer was someone was asking about tips, what you look for when you're planning a trip. Not just an overnight, but trips like the KT, a section hike of the AT. I thought that was a really good question for you because you obviously do a great job of planning trips. So, what are kind of the steps that you go through as you're planning one of those multi-day hikes?
Yeah, that is a great question. And it's tough because for me, I want to know as much information before I get out there. I don't like surprises. So I want to have as much information as I possibly can, to the point that, for example, for the Smoky Mountain National Park, I've watched a few different YouTube videos I'm looking for specific visual things. So, for example, we like to hammock camp, for example. So I want to know, do sites have the setup for good hammock camping, or do I need to bring a tent along? Because you're going to go some places where, a hammock is just not going to work, and vice versa. There might be some spots where you just have uneven ground. You don't have a spot to tent camp. So I like to get into the detail of looking at, even do I have visual evidence of what a campsite looks like fairly recently? To me, that's valuable. But I'm going to look at everything from kind of the national, state level stuff first. So if I'm going to Smoky Mountain National Park, I am going to the National Park website. I'm going into Smoky Mountain National Park. I am printing off maps, trail maps specifically, that have everything from campsite locations. They have mileage. They might not have a whole lot of information about like vertical gain, but that's important to me too. So I'll look at the national and state, if it's a national forest or a national park, or if it's a state forest or state park type of thing. I'm looking at those entities. I'm trying to get information. I'm looking at groups that may be organizations that are in charge of that. So, if it's something like the AT, there's tons of great information from groups that help kind of maintain and keep that pristine. The same thing with Smoky Mountain National Park. There's local groups and organizations. I'm looking on Facebook. I'm looking at blogs. I'm just doing Google searches, trying to get as much information, as much detail as I can possibly get to help me plan everything from, like, we're going to Smoky Mountain National Park at some point, and there's, hundreds of different trail options through that park. It's huge. And it's like a spider web of trails. So I'm looking at, something like Ultralight website or on my phone, an app that can have some, predetermined trails, but I'm building my own, trying to figure out, we were talking earlier today, how far do we want to go? How many miles do we want to hike between stops? How many days do we have? So kind of having some basic parameters in place then allows me to look at those maps that I get from either, the national parks or the state parks or all trails or the local groups. And then I start asking questions, kind of like you did with Four Pass Loop. Hey, what are the epic spots? Where are some visuals? Like,
what direction should we go?
Well, yeah, it matters. I'd like to see, I hear there's this super cool waterfall, and then there's this mountaintop view, and, can we go past Klingman's Dome in North Carolina, and like all these different things. So you start to put those together and say, I can't find a route that hits all of those, but I can find a route that hits 3 of them, and we can do it in 4 days and 3 nights, and that allows for some travel time. So I'm looking at a lot of that kind of stuff. But then I'll typically, when I have an idea of what I want to do, then I'm going back and looking for specifics. Is there anybody that's posted visuals of what that trail looks like, that section of trail, that campsite? Because a lot of that's out there now. Like before, if you went to do this search 20 years ago, you would not have that. You'd have some blogs that would describe what this campsite roughly looks like, what this section of trail is roughly like. But now we're blessed that you can actually go and find a lot of these. Hey, I want to go to campsite 34 and I want to stop at campsite, XYZ. You can go look that up and find a lot of that information and visually see, hey, that's a big campsite. There's lots of trees. It looks like there'd be great spots for hanging a hammock, or you know what, that looks like a better tent. Or people just give commentary. They're doing a review, a video, kind of like we do of our trail, adventures. And part of it is, hey, we're having fun and we want to share that, and hopefully it's entertaining. But at the same point, I'd love to show, give some tips and tricks. What does it actually look like? So that if you're thinking of doing this, here's what this campsite looks like. Here's what the facilities look like. Here's, where the water is. Like, that stuff's valuable. And now we can find a lot of that stuff online. So that's kind of the long answer of how do I do trip planning. But that's kind of a quick snapshot even into what that looks like. And then I'm building spreadsheets. I think I sent some to Brent with the Colorado trip where it was like, here's a price breakdown of this hotel, here's the mileage distance to here, and it kind of, you get into like even a timeline. Here's what I think the day roughly will look like. We're going to have the flexibility to adapt if it doesn't go exactly to plan, but I kind of have an idea. I knew on the 4-pass loop roughly where the campsites were. Hey, there's 4 in this pocket, so hopefully we'll get one of those. And then like the second day, we did 2 passes, and we passed like 5 prime campsites that were like phenomenal because we're like, hey, well, we want to go to the end of the pass. And I think there's stuff that's down on the end. I know there's like 3 or 4 sites. I don't know if they're really great, but the bigger issue is I don't know if they're taken because it's first come, first serve. So we kind of had to roll the dice a little bit on something like that and got to the end, and it was like, oh, wait, these all look terrible until we find just one that was awesome. So
yeah, we got a little lucky that day because we were definitely pushing our luck.
Well, and we were done. I think both of us were like, I'm done. We've done 10 miles. We've done 2 passes at 12,500 feet. Lots of vertical, lots of miles. I want to stop. I just need a good spot to. And for me, you had a tent and I had a hammock. So it was kind of the challenge of, I got to find the site that has both, And I think we found some spots where, hey, this could really work for a hammock. There's nowhere to put a tent here, or vice versa. There are like 8 spots for a tent. I have no idea where you put a hammock on this site. So we had to keep going.
Well, heck, day 1 we split and we stayed at 2 different sites.
Well, that's true. And that's a good point. So we got to the end of day 1, and he found a spot. Well, I found the spot, and I said, "This is awesome for tents. If I were you, I would set up right here." But there's nowhere for me here at all. Within 100 yards, there's nothing. So there's a spot way up on that hill, 150 yards up the hill or whatever it was. I'm going to take that because that's a pretty cool spot for a hammock. But I can see you and you can see me, and we can probably shout at each other, but we're not camping next to each other. So you have to be willing to do something like that. But we still had a rough idea of where we wanted to be, how we wanted it to be, and mapping that out to the point where we were looking at our GPS going, okay, the campsite should be between 1 mile and 2 miles. There's like 4 of them. Let's pick one, so we had that kind of detail, which is really nice.
Yeah, it was awesome. Do you have it pulled up or no?
Oh, questions? Well, we've got one comment from Nathan that talks about Garden of the Gods. Did a couple months ago. Absolutely awesome. That's a big area too. I was kind of surprised looking at that, just how big that is. There's a lot of options. You've got that big long trail, the through trail that runs all the way through Garden of the Gods, all the way. I forget what it's called, but it's
river to river, I think.
Yeah, something like that, and it's huge, and it goes through like 5 different pockets that are like hotspots for camping and backpacking. So I don't know a whole lot about that. I'm aware of the Garden of the Gods area, but I also hear there's a couple other spots that are really, really cool. And maybe even a little less trafficked, which I'm always a fan of. If you can find really epic views or epic experiences, but they're just not overrun.
And the observation trail is the big one down there. That's the one that everybody goes to. But if I'm not mistaken, I don't think you can camp on it. I think you have to go further off into Shawnee National Forest to camp, but it's all nearby. So lots of options down there. Definitely something that's on the list of things to get done, but it's just not at the top right now.
Yeah. Let's go through. I do have it up now. So if we look at some of the questions that people posted from earlier, let's see. We talked about this a little before we went live too. Scott had the post about why do people say ultralight is expensive, even though it has been proven time and time again that is either plainly isn't, or is just barely more expensive more expensive, and why don't people understand that buying multiple, items of budget gear just equals up to costing the same? It's kind of that, buy once, cry once. Is that what you said earlier today?
Yeah, I think that's what I've even seen Scott say before too, and he's right. It's you're definitely going to feel the pain on some of that gear, but if you buy it right the first time, then you're good. Unfortunately, not everybody's in a position to do that financially, especially this year too.
Well, and I don't think it's necessarily even just a financial question.
Sure, that's true. And when you and I talked about this earlier, we talked about ultralight, and you really can't pinhole something that, okay, if your base weight is so many pounds, so many ounces, you're ultralight, you're good to go. I think ultralight in its true form takes on different meanings, and ultralight should, at least to me, it means simplicity. It's about going as light as you can, going without as much as you can, and I think you and I agreed that you can spend big money on gear, you can spend half of that and get gear that still works, that's not the heaviest stuff on the market. It's good. You're not going to be the lightest guy in the world, but will it work for you? Yeah, absolutely. And can you get sub 10 pounds with that gear? Sure. But I think the number one thing that you can do is eliminate excess stuff, eliminate redundancies, eliminate stuff that you just don't need. We talked a lot about it with the food that we took on 4-pass food. I mean, going all the way down to that level of how much food do I really need? How many changes of clothes do I really need? I think you and I have got it dialed in that we have one set of clothes to hike in, one set of clothes to sleep in, and rain gear and a puffy jacket, and that's about it. Maybe hats and gloves are a buff, but
if you bring the puffy jacket,
if you don't leave the puffy jacket in the hotel, right? That was
guilty.
Man, you were so angry, so angry day one when you.
I got to camp the first night of the 4-pass loop, and he throws on his puffy jacket, and it's like, wow, this is so toasty warm, and I'm like, gosh, I'm really cold. I should go get my puffy jacket, and I'm digging through my bag, and I'm like, I'm cursing at myself, like, where the heck? And it hits me. The night before, I took everything out of my pack, go through everything, itemize again. I kind of, being prepared is kind of drilled into me. So you go through that stuff. So do I have everything? Is the food, and I'm repacking my. Well, as I'm throwing the stuff out of my pack onto the bed, my puffy jacket's stuffed in its own pocket. It's a Mountain Hardwear Ghost Whisperer, and I throw it on the bed, and it bounces on the bed and falls between the bed and the wall. And I looked at it, and I was like, I'm going to have to remember to get that. And then I finished going through all my gear, and then I repacked my pack, and then I put my pack over on the desk, and I went to bed. And it didn't hit me.
Puffy jacket stayed in the room.
And it didn't hit me until I got to camp, and I saw him put on his puffy jacket, and I thought, that looks really nice right now. I'm going to get my puffy on. And I'm going through my bag, and it's not there, and it hits me, and I'm like, I see the visual of it bouncing on the bed and going between the bed and the wall. And I thought, I never went back and got that. It's still in the hotel. And I told him that. I said, my puffy's still in the hotel, just so you know. So I'm going to hike the 4-pass loop without that layer of insulation. So I had Patagonia R1, kind of a fleece hoodie above my base layer. And then I just had my rain jacket, which was an Arc'teryx. I had the Zeta LT, I think. And I love that. But it's more like a windbreaker / hard shell for the rain. It's not going to keep you warm. So that first night, I'm cold. We're sitting out there, talking. I'm trying to take pictures of the stars and do all this stuff. And I'm like, I freaking wish I had my puffy jacket right about now. So, but the lesson learned from that is, hey, I can get by even in those kind of temperatures. It was just, okay, when you get really cold, go get in your bed. I had a 20 degree down in lighting equipment quilt in my hammock, and I had a 20 degree hammock gear econ under quilt. And I don't think we got into the 20s the whole time we were there. I mean, we got into the 30s a couple times, But as soon as I got in there, I was toasty warm. So I was not, the threat of freezing was really not there. It was just, hey, my comfort around camp was a little bit diminished. So maybe I don't hang out at dinner as long, or just have, I get in my bag a little earlier, or maybe I bring my bag out to camp and I put my bag around me. So that's my insulation layer. There's other ways around it. I think the UL, going back to that, the UL approach is a mentality. It's a decision that I want to be a little bit more minimal in what I bring, knowing that I can handle anything that's thrown at me with this gear. If it's wet, if it's cold, if it's hot, it doesn't matter. I can make do with the gear that I have. It's modular. It's and then my skill and my own grit, my own mentality on top of that, I can handle that. But there is a trade-off between comfort, and ultralight. I always joke that you're either deciding to be completely comfortable on trail because your pack is super light, or you're looking for, comfort in camp. You're bringing the chair, you're bringing the, whatever extra to make your camp life. And some people focus on different things. Hey, I want to crank miles. I want to have a beautiful experience, see as many things as I possibly can. I probably want to be lighter in my setup so that I can really get to these different places that otherwise I wouldn't be able to see. And some people are like, hey, I'm happy to hike, 10 miles total. That's plenty. I want to have like an awesome experience. Let's get to camp early. I'm going to cook a ribeye. I'm going to bring my beer. I'm going to bring some Fireball. I'm going to have some other creature comforts in camp. So I'm happy to carry the weight because my camp experience is actually what everything revolves around. So, and then there's the middle ground, which I think is kind of where we are, where it's like, I kind of want to be as light as I can, but I'm also bringing a chair, and there's no ultralighter that's looking at you going, a chair makes sense, because it's a luxury. It's a luxury item. You're bringing a pound just to sit. A lot of people will say, well, bring a sit pad. It's 4 ounces or 2 ounces and sit on a stump, and I'm like, no, I had back surgery 2 years ago. I'm good with a chair. I'll bring the extra pound and struggle on the trail with that extra pound so that my camp life is a little bit more comfortable. So you're balancing comfort on trail with comfort in camp, and the mentality, I think, with the ultralight community, and I believe a lot in that, is, hey, we can get by with very little. There's no reason to necessarily carry all these extra things, and if you can be comfortable and mentally, get past some of those roadblocks, it's a really cool experience. Like, I really enjoy doing that on the AHT of having an ultralight loadout. I don't know that I would do that every time, but it was really eye-opening to at least try that. So,
to see how much you can go without and still, have an overall good experience. It was fun. I mean, I still carried a chair and I had an 8-pound base weight. It was pretty cool.
I brought the chair too, even with the ultralight setup. I'm like, I'm not giving that chair up. I'm keeping it.
Yep.
I'm just going to figure out something else I'm not bringing. I don't know what it was, but I had to cut something out of that so that I could
rain gear. I didn't even bring rain gear that trip.
To be honest, I don't think I did either, because we looked at the forecast and there was like 0 to 10% chance of rain. And it was like 85 degrees or something like, I don't know, remember exactly. Again, the further we go out from that trip, it's like we climbed 10,000 feet and it was 95 degrees and like the mosquitoes were the size of birds. I don't know. But I think I left all my rain gear, so it was like I can save, I don't know, half a pound on that. So I'm bringing my chair. I mean, we had a good time. So for us, it's a balance with probably a little bit more towards lighter weight stuff. I think, though, with people looking at the ultralight community, if you're getting into backpacking, the issue is, one, there's a cost, okay? And I think Scott has a great point. If you really look at the cost of going the traditional way, which is like, you buy the heavy stuff because you're just getting into it, and then you learn a little bit more, and then you end up buying like 3 different tents to get to the one that you're really comfortable with, or you're buying like 4 different backpacks before you get to the one that's more ultralight and more of what you're looking for. And you go through that with almost everything. Your clothing setup changes, your footwear changes.
Yeah.
You know, I my first hiking trip was in leather hiking boots, you know, full on, like they were straight out of like the 70s. They probably weighed like 3 pounds for the pair. They were heavy. They were like big, thick, durable leather stuff, but now I'm in like trail runners. And again, it's part of it's the lightweight thing, part of it's just a comfort, part of it is just the evolution. I thought before too, and they weren't even waterproof. I went through a period of time where I was like, oh, I think I need to have just only waterproof boots. And then I got to the point where I'm like, why? Everything just ends up getting wet at some point.
I bought a pair of those and never wore them.
Well, and
ended up returning them.
I still have a place for them. So for me though, they're winter hikers. So I have a waterproof, you know, Solomon boots that are great for keeping my feet a little warmer and going through, you know, winter hiking. Where they would suck, where they wouldn't be good, is if you do winter hiking and you have to like do water crossings where your feet are going to get submerged. Because I would probably take the boots off and go through like barefoot and then towel off and put my socks and boots back on. But otherwise, you know, walking through snow, getting them wet, they're not that big of a deal. Where the trail runners, you know, like Ultra Lone Peaks or something like that, they get wet, your socks get wet, and if you're in 30-degree weather, you know, you have that issue of just, I'm walking around with wet feet, and I don't care if I change my socks, my shoes are soaked. They're not going to be undone. I don't mind that when it's 60 degrees out, when it's 80 degrees out. You know, I'm going through water crossings and I'm just walking through the streams. Like, I really don't care. I don't try and keep my feet dry if I know it's impossible. You know, if I've got a knee-deep crossing, there's no way around it. But in winter weather, I'm probably trying to avoid those types of things. I'm really worried about keeping dry, keeping warm. And when it gets cold, for me, the big thing is, can you keep dry? So your rain gear gets better. You know, I'll go with the lighter stuff in the middle of the summer because I'm not quite as worried about hypothermia. I can get a little bit damp, I can get a little bit wet, and the stuff dries out typically pretty quickly. You get into 30 and 40 degree weather, you know, getting wet can be dangerous. So that mentality changes a little bit.
Yeah, and those Arc'teryx worked out pretty good. So back to the root of the question, though, the ultralight question.
Yeah.
I think there's a process for everybody. I think everybody starts somewhere. You start with what you have, what you can get your hands on.
Yeah.
And then as you want to go that ultralight route, there's certain steps that you should take. First one is knowing what you have and what you have weighs. Weigh your gear, use a lighter pack list, start doing shakedown hikes.
Evaluate it after.
Yeah, eliminate out the stuff that you don't use. That's the number one biggest way to drop weight out of a backpack is just by cutting what you have that you don't use or don't need.
Yeah.
And then as you go for that premium gear, you know, make good decisions. There's hundreds of YouTube videos out there. There's all sorts of blogs, you know, just like on the trip planning aspect, there's probably even more of that out there on gear itself. And, you know, there's no one right solution that's there for everybody. You know, you can't say, hey, this is the best sleeping pad on the market. You have to get this one because it's all situational. It depends on each person. So make the right decisions, you know, try to knock down those biggest weight savings first, and your back will thank you on trail.
Yeah.
And I think that's the road to ultralight. That's the road that most of us follow.
Yeah.
Whether you're going true ultralight, trying to get down to that, you know, 5-6 pound base weight like Scotty Boy does.
Yeah.
Or if you're shooting, you know, let's just go sub 10, or if you're going 8. Honestly, guys, 2 pounds doesn't really make a difference on trail. It's a number. It's about the experience. So get out there and have fun.
I think everybody wants to get lighter. So I think that's universal to everybody that's backpacking is if you've carried a pack, you would love to carry a pack that's 1 pound lighter. So I think that's kind of the goal that we all have is, you know, the point I was trying to make even earlier was it's not just a financial decision, is a lot of it too is a learning curve. You have to know what you want and what'll work for you, and sometimes the only way that you get that is through the experience of trying it. Okay, unfortunately. Now, luckily today, as Brent just mentioned, you have the option of going online and seeing a lot of information, a lot of reviews, a lot of data on what's out there. So you have a much better chance of getting something that you can dial in and works great for you. But there's still a learning curve. I mean, when you start backpacking, do you know how to size a pack properly? Well, what size pack? I can buy this model, but which size fits me? Um, what capacity do I want my pack to have? Do I need my pack to have? What features do I want my pack to have? What materials do I want my pack made out of? Do I want a hip belt? Do I not want a hip belt? Do I want load lifters? Do I not want load lifters? Do you even know what I'm talking about at this point in time? For those people that are getting into backpacking, you're learning. It's like a new language. So it's hard to jump into some of the ultralight stuff just because you have no clue into whether that stuff will work or not. So I think, some of it is financial, but some of it's just a learning curve that you go, okay, I've learned a little bit. I can get to this point, and then you start to modify that. And like Brent said, I think the biggest thing you could do is evaluate what you have. If you already have a setup, how do you make your setup lighter? I've got a video that I posted a year or so back about, cutting your base weight. And it had like 7 different tips of things that are great to look at to just cutting base weight. You mentioned a couple of them, weighing your gear, keeping an inventory. If you're going out in a group, share items. Hey, you're going to carry the stove. We don't need to carry 4 stoves if one guy's going to do most of the cooking, or
Yeah, we always bring 2 when we go out.
we do, but we've also, I think your stove is like, if we're doing the BRS 3000, it's like, hey, this is less than an ounce.
Yeah.
Or something stupid crazy like that. So there's ways around it, but some of it's convenience. If I've gone out in a bigger group with scouts, like we're bringing a bigger stove, we're bringing a bigger pot, and one guy's carrying one thing and one guy's carrying the other, and then nobody else has cooked stuff. Somebody else is carrying the food, somebody else is carrying the first aid kit. Like you don't all need to have first aid kits. You don't all need. So there's little things like that you can pick up. But I think some of it's just learning what works for you. And the tough part is, how do you know what you don't know? So I would encourage everybody, if you're newer or wanting to get lighter, is consume as much as you can in information. Look at blogs, look at websites, look at YouTube. Watch. I learn a lot from watching guys, whether it's like Scott or others that have done this a long time and have a wealth of knowledge. There's so much information out there, and I love watching what they do and taking little things. I love that idea. I can incorporate that somehow into me. And sometimes I look at it and go, yeah, I'm not willing to make that sacrifice. And you have to do that. But I think then slowly over time, I think what's more normal is you see that evolution. It costs more. It absolutely does. You go through 3 or 4 different backpacks until you find one that really you love for the right reasons, because you know what you actually want, and the same thing for tents, for shelters, for hammocks, for sleep gear, for clothing, everything. I mean, everything on your list, you go through that exact same process of like shaking it down. What works, what doesn't work. Every time you get back from a trip, what did you not use? Can you leave that behind next time?
Well, that's part of it. It's hard to just nail down the perfect kit, the perfect gear for you off of a YouTube review. You don't really know until you've used it. So,
yeah,
when you factor in the costs, or why do people upgrade 2, 3, 4 times? I mean, I've done it on a lot of my pieces of gear, and it's because I tried something and I liked it, and then I wanted more out of it, and I found something that would give me more, so I made the changes.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just backpacking. That's going to happen whether you're shooting for ultralight or ultra durable, or it's going to change. You're going to keep buying gear. That's part of it. That's the way it is. So yeah, make good decisions based on your budget and do as much research as you can to try to minimize the mistakes.
Yeah. Yep. Let's see if there's any other questions here from this one. We talked a little bit, if you're getting into backpacking, what are some good first locations that you would look at? Is there anywhere that you'd recommend for newer backpackers getting into this?
So in Indiana, it's going to depend a lot on where you live in the state, because staying nearby or closer to home is always a good idea when you start backpacking, because you have that bailout option. If you live in, Maryville, Crown Point, Northwest Indiana, I probably wouldn't suggest Two Lakes Loop for your first trip, because you're going to be hours from home.
Right.
That being said, something short mileage, for me, it was Morgan Monroe State Forest. It was a low gap trail.
Yep.
That's a really common one for a lot of people, especially in central Indiana.
Yep.
But, low gap was perfect for me, because on my first trip, I actually hiked 1.5 miles. I parked in the backcountry. I hiked up the big hill and stayed at the big campsite up there. And the plan was to do the whole loop the next day, and it was January and it was cold. Yes, my first backpacking trip was in January. I woke up and I froze my butt off the night before and decided to hike back to the car, and I was done for the night.
Yep.
But it didn't ruin backpacking for me. So,
yeah.
Having those options, having that option to hike, 1 mile back to my car versus being in the middle of somewhere, and I'm only, an hour and a half from home. So it's a pretty easy drive. That was a big learning experience. I think everyone's going to have a big learning experience on their first trip. So that's my suggestions. Try to stay close to home. Try to not do a big mileage thing. If you can, go with people who have some experience backpacking,
Yep.
so that if you have any issues or any questions, they can kind of help you through. I think that would be my big three.
How do you find people that have that knowledge? I think a lot of people, me included, were in that group of, I don't have a lot of friends that do this. And a lot of the friends that I have look at me and say, you want to do what? Like, it's going to be 40 degrees outside and you want to go sleep out in the woods? Like, what's wrong with you? So how do you go about, what'd you recommend for someone here in Indiana or even elsewhere looking at building their network? How do I find people that are more experienced than me?
So I did it through the Facebook group. I did it through Who's Your Hiker Backpackers, the same place I met you, the same place I met Kenny, who I did my first overnight with. It's a great community, but having access to the internet now, having access to those Facebook groups for people with similar interests, I just lucked out. It was a guy who he was a retail store manager like I was. We kind of connected through the mentorship program in the group, and we ended up doing an overnight together, and I was hooked and never looked back from it. But a lot of people, that's a great point, Andy. A lot of people don't have that. They don't have friends or family members who do this, and it's hard to just dive into this, especially solo, right? It's hard to just commit and say, hey, I'm going to go do this. I'm going to go out and I'm going to pack a bag and I'm going to go survive outdoors for the overnight and see what happens. I do recommend going in a group. Obviously, make smart decisions on who you go out with. But that's what worked for me. How about you? How'd you do your first overnight?
Well, I did the first one I did, my first trip at all, was a buddy of mine, and both of us were complete noobs. So I laugh looking up those pictures, 2014, maybe something like that. So it's been a little while. Looking at those videos and we did low gap trail. We just parked and we hiked to the back country, camped, and then hiked back the same way. So about 5 miles in, about 5 miles out, I had blisters all over my feet. Way too much gear, way too heavy. We had a great time, but I learned more from that trip of what not to do than actually anything that I still use today. But then I went back to that exact same trail twice after that and did my first solo and my second solo So my first tent camping solo and then my first hammock camping solo were both on that Low Gap Trail. And those two, I just started at the backcountry camp parking lot and then hiked up the ridge. So the first one was like 3/4 of a mile up, if that, and camped. And then the second one was like maybe a shade over a mile. And I still had way too much stuff, and I didn't really know what I was doing at the time. And I didn't even think of myself as like a backpacker. I was kind of more like do I want to be a bushcrafter? Do I want to be a camper? Do I want to be a backpack? I didn't really know. I'm doing this, but I'm trying to figure it out. So like I carried an axe with me on one of those trips. I had like a big knife for like processing wood, also to baton and split stuff. I probably had about 35 pounds worth of gear, and my backpack was full, so I was hiking up the hill with like a sleeping bag under my arm, and I don't even know what was in the other. Maybe my tent or something was in the other. I slept in the second one in a hammock. I didn't know what underquilts were, so I didn't have an underquilt. I had a sleeping bag, and I realized that I was kind of cold in November, sleeping in a hammock in southern Indiana. So I learned a ton, but I look back on some of that stuff, and there's videos of it. You can go, like, my early channel stuff, that stuff's in there. My second one, the first solo one, I think it might have been like my first video. It's like 4 minutes long, and it's me like at the campsite in the morning, like freezing my butt off in a tent. And then the second one, something about Tecumseh Trail, Low Gap Trail, A Walk in the Woods, I think is the title of it, something like that. You can go look it up. It's hilarious. Like, you go watch that stuff, watch what I'm wearing, watch the gear that I have like strewn out around the campsite.
The floppy-eared hat.
Yeah,
the lumberjack hat.
That's in there. Like, I've got that. I was in a layering setup. I don't wear any of that stuff anymore. Like, it's all good stuff, and it's all like, if you're going out to sit in the woods or, I don't know, hunt or day hike or something where maybe you're not moving around a ton, it'd keep you warm. Like, the stuff works, but it's not light and it's not fitting in a pack easily. So it worked, but like, again, those kind of trips I laugh at now, I look at, but they were absolutely crucial in me learning what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
yeah. I think that's about all I got tonight, buddy. My puppy's getting restless.
Yep. Well, I think that's plenty of time. That's actually a lot longer than I expected to go. And we joked earlier that if we got on and started talking about gear or whatever, we could probably talk for weeks. So I think this is a good spot to just kind of wrap up for this podcast, this live stream. I appreciate those of you that have joined us tonight for the thoughts, the questions, the comments. We're watching those as we go through. Really, really appreciate it. If you found this useful, go ahead and give us a thumbs up. It does help the channel. It does help people find us. And we're all about just sharing information and building, the backpacking community one person at a time. So thanks so much for Brent. I'm Andy. Thanks for watching. Until next time, be well.